for Elijah down at the brook, and there allowed him to lay in the cool shade and drink from the brook of the cool running water.
Peace and blessings. It's your boy James Anthony, and as we learn together, we define limitless. Today we have Fred Rispoli and Patrick Riley. Fred is the lead counsel for Reaper.Financial. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. What about you, Patrick? How you doing today?
Doing great. How are you, James?
Very grateful. We also have Dale down there. Say hi, Dale.
It's a thank you note to Patrick and Fred for being on this AMA.
Amen.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the AMA. Thanks, Fred and Patrick, for being here.
Awesome. So we basically wanted to get into the specifics about this Amicus Brief. I mean, it's just mind-boggling how you guys are the 13th one, right? Symbolism rules this world for sure. So you guys are the 13th one as the Grim Reaper. I mean, the Reaper.Financial. And so we would like if you can give us a quick broad overview on Fred.
Yeah, about that. Fred, do you know what the 13th one is and November 9th or something or whenever? See, Patrick's over there smiling. I can see him smiling right there. Do you know what it means? Because I don't know what it means.
What are you talking about? The symbolism of?
Yeah, the numerology that you guys are always talking about. I don't know. Do you know what it means, Fred?
All I know is that we had the brief ready at a certain time, and Patrick just kept saying, "No, not yet, not yet, not yet. Now go file it today."
Okay, Patrick, what's the numerology? What's the math behind it?
What's the science behind it?
So I'll just say that symbolism and numerology are their own languages, and using them in communication helps to say things to those who already understand those languages, and me translating it would not do it justice. So if you know, you know.
Okay, that was really cryptic.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Well, the world isn't what we think it is, and there's definitely another language that speaks very loudly, symbols and numbers, and so touche for you, Patrick. Fred, can you give us a broad overview of your perspective?
Yeah, are we talking about on the briefs or on my life in general?
Well, let's start with the briefs.
And a lot of this stuff has been covered, but just to re-emphasize, amicus briefs are usually filed in appellate cases. So, think of voting rights, think of the abortion issue, think of gambling, across state lines. Like any big issue that gets decided at the trial court goes up onto appeal. And it's going to be important and momentous. People file amicus briefs, and it's very rare to do it at the district court level. In fact, a lot of organizations, other bodies, usually say, "I don't even want to get involved right now."
Right.
I do a lot of work outside of the crypto sphere in medical malpractice and helping people that are injured. And I've tried to reach out to professional medical societies to say, "Hey, get in here. This directly impacts you, your membership." And they just say, "No, we're not going to get involved in the trial court level."
Wow.
So the fact that so many entities got involved, Reaper.Financial, obviously the best one of the bunch, it speaks to, and I say that in jest, everybody is just amazing that we got in here.
Amen.
The point is not lost on the judge that this is a momentous case that really affects a wide swath of people. And, she was very liberal in allowing all of the briefs in to get admitted and filed. So that's kind of what the amicus is in a nutshell. And I think the judge is going to read all of them, and I think she's going to give them the weight each one deserves. And I think it'll be really interesting, and I'm very much looking forward ultimately to the order. Two things: to the reply briefing by Ripple and the SEC to see how they address everyone's briefs, I feel they're going to probably try and ignore some, really hammer others. You know, the SEC is going to try and whack John Deaton's brief as much as they can since he's the biggest player.
Yeah, is that like the procedure? It'll go back and forth, and they'll basically respond to each one, or they.
It's up to them. It's up to them to see what they're going to do or not. And Ripple we're going to get a chance to see what Ripple wants to say about it. We're going to get a chance to see what the SEC has to say about it. And I think some will just be straight up ignored. And I think there'll be a lot of time spent on them. So, you know, I'm hoping, obviously John's brief is going to get a lot of attention on both sides.
Yeah.
Coinbase will probably get a lot of attention. Some of the more, we're just focusing on the law. We don't really care about XRP, XRPL so much. You know, the more general, this could affect all of crypto briefs like Blockchain Association.
Yeah.
I think they'll get a lot of play, and you know, it'll be nice to see if anybody reacts to Spend the Bits, Reaper.Financial, TapJets. And then ultimately, it'll be really interesting to see what comes out in the judge's order, because this is a historic case, and lawyers especially love it when, you know, they get cited in rulings that are gonna, you know, potentially go all the way up on appeal. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. That's what I'm excited for, what I'm looking forward to.
No
Let me ask you this. Okay, so today was your deadline. And one of the questions that came in is, does this mean you can modify what you already submitted, and if it does, can you modify it? Because she gave you some time, November 18th, which is today, to submit it, but does it have to be submitted exactly like you did before?
So generally, yes. The issue is you don't want to get called out by one of the parties for something super off the rails from what you submitted. I'll just say there were some differences in some of the briefs that were submitted. I didn't see anything structurally different except for one. And the issue there is, you just don't want to have the SEC or the Ripple side say, oh, look at this. I mean, this is so different than what you approved. Not that I think that would actually ultimately do anything with the judge, because she was very liberal in letting them all in. She didn't reject one. But it's just not a good idea to stray too far from what you already put in front of her on the record. So, you know, we filed ours like a day later, so I didn't change it really at all, other than to change the dates around for filing. You could have technically, but I think it's a gamble.
Okay. What's your perspective on the judge? I mean, you said that you think she's very liberal, right? Like, you think she's been really fair to all the parties in this case, or is she leaning towards a side?
Well, when I say liberal, I mean in the sense of she's been very open to all of the briefs. You know, what I was worried about when we were thinking about filing one is you don't want to basically just repeat what other people have filed.
Sure.
And Reaper was uniquely positioned because nobody had addressed tokens that are issued on top of the XRPL. And nobody really addressed the transaction fees that you have to use whenever you're using the XRPL. So, you know, we were confident that was a unique thing to get through to add new perspective, because there is a lot of overlap. And I think if you really look at some of the briefs, especially some of the later ones, there's less new stuff that's being added. So liberal in the sense she let everything in.
Yeah.
In terms of her philosophy, I think she's a great judge. I think everybody's getting a fair shake and that she's considering everything. She's being open the way a judge should be open at this case. You know, you've got some judges that might be very pro whatever the government agency is in front of them. And Judge Torres is not like that, in the sense that she doesn't have that built-in bias that, you know, I would wager that the judge in New Hampshire had with Library.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of judges who have been around on the bench a very long time to have that bias. She doesn't have that.
Thank
If
God.
you look at, and again, this is something that non-lawyers might not really have the time to do. I wouldn't expect them to have the time to do. But if you look at some of her other cases that she's been filing opinions on, because she has a ton of them, she's just willing to listen to both sides and try and figure out what is the right thing to do under the law.
Wow.
So she'll give an opinion that might not be what we think is fair, but what is the right thing under the law. And that's what I think is a really good thing, because I don't think the law is on the SEC side here.
Yeah, touche. Listen, we've been in this case, at least following this case, since day one. I mean, I've owned XRP since before this lawsuit was launched, right? And I'm sure Dale as well. And so we've watched this whole thing play out, and like we've had, front row seats. I didn't sell any of my XRP when this happened. I mean, honestly, I'll tell you the truth. I thought this whole thing was a farce. There's like rumors, how the conspiracies go in the community, right? There's rumors that, it's all set up and the case was already settled. But, when you get really close and you start paying attention to what's going on, this is like going to be an epic ruling when this finally comes out, no?
Absolutely, for sure. And, it's not unreasonable to think about this is all a setup from the beginning. This is all a conspiracy. There's a great, I tweeted about it maybe not a long time ago, months ago, but we were trying to get, me and a few other people on Twitter, this reporter, Matt Taibbi, to cover this story, because he's very much in favor of covering Wall Street corruption and the kind of corruption that goes there, because he wrote this great story, so I thought he was going to love this, but I haven't had any luck getting him interested. But he wrote about this story where the judge, same area, Southern District, New York, the SEC sued these big banks. I forget which ones they were, but the usual suspects. And then they're like, oh, okay, we settled for 100, 200, 300 million, whatever it was. And the judge said, well, this is BS. I'm not going to accept this settlement. And everybody was like, what? The banks, the SEC? The judge was like, based on what you said and how bad these banks were, this isn't enough of a settlement. This is almost like you just had a little wink, wink in the back room and decided you were going to come up with this. And no, I'm not accepting it. And then the SEC sued the judge, and that went up to appeal. And the appellate court said, we're going to side with the government. The judge was wrong a judge had to get his own lawyer. The judge was wrong to reject the settlement. So it's very fair to say there's some aspect of wink, wink, nod, nod. I think that's here, but I don't think it was with Ripple, in the sense of where with that case I just mentioned, the banks are like, all right, we get it. Let's go through this a little bit. We'll pay you your millions. I think there are some other people that were like, okay, you got to do this to help us buy some time. And Ripple was just caught in the crosshairs.
Yeah, no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that. I mean, definitely a lot of suffering, for sure.
Do you feel the same way about Judge Nettenberg then as well? I'm assuming you do.
Same. And, I encourage anyone, because it's, just an important piece of civil litigation for American history, is that there is the 9/11 case going on right now against a lot of the people, the family members of those killed and injured in 9/11, suing a certain foreign government. And Judge Nettenberg's on that case. She's the magistrate judge on that case. And that case has been going for a decade, maybe even more. So just remember that when you think the Ripple case is dragging on a little bit, that this case has been going on for a decade. She's the magistrate judge, and there were a couple of leaks. People were leaking depositions, because some major players have been deposed, princes and kings, if you know where I'm going.
Yeah.
And, she came down really hard on the leakers, stopped the litigation almost to find out what was going on, issued some severe punishments, and she just doesn't mess around. And I like that because, the government's involved, other people are involved, foreign governments are involved. So it's just, if anybody ever wants to look that up, just search it.
She did the same thing with us. We were listening into those. I don't know if you
very first, yeah.
And she would, the very first one, people were like live streaming it, and she goes,
"I did
that again. We're not going to do that again." And she laid down the law. I remember that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you guys knew about that before?
Yeah, we know. Yeah, we knew about her, and boy, she was real strict with everybody.
She said, anyone who does it on the next go round, will be severely penalized. And so nobody did it again. I mean, there were other people giving like play-by-plays. But let me ask you a question. So you say, I mean, okay, take into consideration the 10-year situation on the other case. So, I mean, in your honest opinion, like, I mean, obviously this is just speculation, but like, what do you think the end goal? I mean, a lot of people are saying March. Why is everybody saying March of 23?
So it's hard. In litigation, you can only give probabilities. There's just no certainties, because I don't think it's likely, but there could be a settlement over the weekend.
Sure.
I think that's highly unlikely. But the biggest problem that I have is there's been all these chances to extract a lot of money from Ripple from the SEC since the beginning, and Ripple would pay it, even though they're asking for $1 billion, and it's always usually a fraction of that amount in the settlement. I'm of the belief that Ripple would pay $2 billion yesterday if the SEC says XRP is not a security, because they'll quadruple or 10x that the very next day with all of the their XRP holdings, and just the fact that it would just blow off the chain. So that's what's so weird to me. That's why I think there's something going on behind the scenes to slow Ripple down. Is it just the SEC saying we just want to be power hungry and nobody else is giving them instructions? Possible. I doubt it.
Nah, somebody's pulling the strings. There's somebody behind Gary Gensler. He's a freaking pup. God forgive me, but he's definitely not. Yeah,
I'll wrap up. I do want to hear Patrick's thoughts on this one. The thing that what I think is going to happen in the short term, so in the next 6 months, is I think summary judgment gets decided in February, March. And I think what happens is, and real quick, summary judgment just means there's no material factual issues in dispute. So for everybody out there, it's not what's actually true or what the judge thinks is true. That's not it. It's, did the other side come up with enough material facts to say, I can't grant this party's motion? She has to assume that the opposing party's facts are true. That's the requirement. And so it's a high standard. So I think SEC loses on everything on its motion for summary judgment. And I think Ripple actually loses on everything outside of two aspects, which is that the XRPL is not a security / investment contract, and that XRP, completely separate from Ripple, is not a security investment contract. So what happens on the secondary market, me and you exchanging XRP, Reaper.Financial using the XRPL, I do think as a matter of law, she can grant that. And that's really winning 80%, 90% of the game. And so I think that we get that big win, and then Ripple is left to fight. Well, did they truly market XRP as a security when they offered it? I just think the SEC's put up enough facts for what the judge has to do procedurally to take that to trial. But I think if she does rule, XRP is not inherently a security, which I do think she will, I think then the SEC says, all right, we'll settle now.
Okay, so, 2 things. Hold on. Before you get out of here, I want to ask you, are you an XRP holder?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I got in. Yeah, so I started following Bitcoin very early on, like right when it came out, just watching it, and just watching, and then I remember, I don't know what year it was, maybe 11. Anybody who knows it, when it went up to $600, I vividly remember saying to myself, $600? No way I'm buying any now. That's a ripoff. And then I just casually watched it from there. But January 2018, someone just rabidly was talking to me about XRP, Cardano, EOS. And just got me hooked, and so I started buying then. And I just looked at it today. I think so. After everything, my average cost right now is 45 cents. So I went back to being down.
Not bad.
So Fred, one of the questions I had when you mentioned the XRPL, the ledger itself, what does it mean for the tokens like Reaper.Financial token that is on there if she sides with XRP not a security.
Is not a security?
Right.
Well, I mean, that's just a huge win and a victory, because it means that Reaper.Financial, anybody situated that likes to issue tokens on the XRPL, doesn't have to go through these insanely burdensome reporting requirements that the SEC has when it simply transacts in XRP. Because if you think about it, and this is why it's so ridiculous, and why, you know, Patrick and I really were talking about hitting the transaction cost side of it and utilizing, you know, XRP as an underlying mechanism for Reaper, the RPR token, is that you use so much XRP every single transaction. Now, granted, it's a fractional amount, but you use it. So if you had to report that every single time, well, we all know what the TPS can be on the XRPL. I mean, it can be, you know, 50, what is it now, 50,000 a second? I mean, it's just ridiculous to apply reporting requirements to that. So
they could bootstrap it to a lot more, though. Yeah.
So, I mean, so it would be a huge win for, you know, Reaper. And, you know, that's why Reaper's leading the charge, basically, on behalf of every other token that's issuing on the XRPL. Because from that perspective, even though there's so much more that Reaper does than, you know, other projects, it is in the same boat of any other project that issues a coin or token on the ledger. So that's why Reaper's fighting for a lot of projects.
So it means that the SEC can't come after these tokens on the XRPL, or can they?
Well, they still could, for two reasons. One, the SEC can do whatever it wants, and you have to fight them off in court if they target you. It's kind of, you know, when I tell, you know, somebody, when my kids are fighting, and they, you know, because their dad's a lawyer, they're like, oh, well, you touched my leg, I'm going to sue you. And, you know, my other one will be like, you can't sue me for that. And I'm like, well, actually, she could. I don't think the case is going to go anywhere, because you're not going to prove damages, and it's not truly all the elements of a simple battery or assault. But she could file the lawsuit and, you know, try and sue her brother. So the SEC can always do that whenever it wants. They can harass, and that's what they've done everywhere until they ran into Ripple, who's like, yeah, we'll fight this. We have $100 million to spend.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the second point is, and this can be true, I mean, you can have a security or investment contract on XRPL. You can have one on Ethereum. You can have one on the Bitcoin network. Apple could put their stock, they could issue an Apple coin on XRPL, and they can say this represents a share of our company. So, I mean, you can easily securitize coins on the ledger. So they could still go after, you know, what I would say, and nobody would probably question as a security, if Apple put, you know, shares on a ledger.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Patrick, back to then the case time frame. What Fred was asking you about that.
So as far as the case time frame, I think that the reason for the case to begin with is much more global and geopolitical than most people realize. So given that, you know, the United States is drowning in debt, as is most of the nations around the world, we're looking at a situation where right now the United States, which has been the global reserve currency since the Bretton Woods Agreement, is in a real danger of losing that fiscal superiority on a global stage. And typically that comes with, you know, a military confrontation. And we're starting to get into a very dangerous area between the United States and the BRICS alliance. So the BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they are currently working on their digital currency and their BRICS, basically basket of currencies that will be a BRICS reserve currency for those nations. And they have a lot more real estate than the United States between, you know, China and Russia and Brazil, and they have a lot more ability to affect their near neighbors than perhaps the United States, which is projecting power across the globe. So I think that there is a very real possibility that, as you said, James, this was used to slow XRP and rippled down, which it hasn't slowed it down globally, but it's slowed it down in the United States.
Yeah.
So that's why I made a post a while back about this case being a national security issue. I think it very much is a national security issue when we're threatening to dislodge the United States from its ability to compete on a global level if XRP was declared a security. So the time frame, I think, is very much dependent on politics. And I think that if the runoff election coming up in January puts the House and the Senate on the red side, which the House is already on the red, then I think we see the case end sooner. I think if it stays on the left, we see the case draw out into appeal.
Okay.
Patrick McHenry, right? He's didn't he just make it into the Senate?
No, he will be the Financial Services
Committee. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Fred, we have a couple more questions on the Amicus Brief. Let me bring that back up. Jeremy Hogan's, I think you looked into this, these two cases that came in as briefs for the SEC, which is the Credify and also the NEIS, I guess, those two. And you looked into the NEIS, and Jeremy Hogan here says that, so what unique perspective is it bringing to the court? It's more like a research paper than an amicus brief. How do you feel about that?
It's interesting to see why, or to know why these two pro SEC briefs were filed. Obviously anybody has a right to file it, especially if they think their business interests are at stake. And I think was it a Credify or a Credit Now? A Credify?
Credify.
They are in the business of accrediting investors, and if XRP and any crypto requires, a designation where you have to be an accredited investor, that's gonna boom this filer's business, and that's okay. People can file briefs on their own, interest. And so, if everybody, and the way I looked into it in terms of what happens if an asset becomes accredited only after, you've already been able to get it as a non-accredited investor. And it usually, in almost every case, you get grandfathered in if you don't hit the threshold. And so, if everything gets resolved for crypto in a way that you do have to be an accredited investor, everybody could still all of a sudden have a ton of US dollar worth crypto all of a sudden, because, okay, it's not how we wanted it to go, but we now have clarity. You have to be an accredited investor. And so now everybody that, is well below the $1 million threshold, now because there's clarity, they went 10x, 100x on their bags, and now they could all become accredited investors. Well, why don't you give a Credify a call and, get accredited? And now you've, 10x the number of people that need someone to make sure they're accredited. So, it makes sense from a business perspective. It also makes sense somebody who has to deal with the SEC to file a friendly brief on their behalf. It did seem a little rushed, but I've been there before where I'm like, I got to get this out, and it might not be as clean as I wanted. And there actually were a lot of good points in there for XRP too. I don't want to, even though it was for the SEC ostensibly, there were some good points saying it's just not clear. And so the court needs to make it clear. The NSEI one, I did a Twitter thread on this one. I won't go too deep into it here, but it's just really weird. There's a lot of really weird circumstances. It's a company that is being sued by the SEC right now.
Go figure.
They settled with the SEC just this past September, October. Just told the court in October, the only thing we got to wrap up is how much money we're going to pay to the SEC. And, it's different lawyers that were involved in that case and who filed the brief. The law firm who filed the brief is right across the street from the SEC. And, they only get involved when sports gambling is involved. They filed this company has filed amicus briefs before, but only when sports gambling is involved. So it's completely out of left field, and it's
Literally.
yeah. So it's it's interesting that, I mean, and it could be all just strange coincidences, but those are I listed all of those coincidences, and they are fact.
Yeah.
And you got to draw your own conclusions. There are, I called it ghost briefs in my thread, but there are occasions when a firm will contract another lawyer somewhere else to write something for them, or they'll give them a call and say, hey, will you file an amicus on my behalf? And so that does happen all the time, and they could do it in a way where we'd never know it. And so did the SEC do that here? I don't know for a fact. I just know there's a lot of coincidences.
Yeah, no such thing as a coincidence. Technically, there's no such thing as a coincidence, right?
Was there a lawyer that had admitted on Twitter that he had never been in federal court? Wasn't there something like that?
So the Accredify attorney, I had a discussion, or more or less a drag session with him on Twitter, and he admitted that this was an emotional.
That's right. I remember that.
Hip pocket response that he did in the last 4 hours before he submitted it.
Oh wow, Fred, we're going to shift gears a little bit to another question that we have for you. This comes from what we watch you doing. This is pretty passionate. It's your pinned tweet, and it's all about you're organizing a class action against Clayton and Hinman. Can you talk about that XRPL or XRPlawsuits.com?
Yeah, so that's the website if you want to go sign up for getting interest, if you're interested in joining that class action. Filed it in April, on the Monday after the emails came out on Friday of all the conflicts of interest that Hinman was being warned about by the SEC Ethics Council. And actually, like the Accredify lawyer, it just got me so hot and bothered that there's so much seemingly foul play involved. I just spent all weekend working on it and trying to set it up. I set it up so it should have had no impact on the Ripple case because I didn't want to slow anything down there. So it's against Hinman and Clayton personally, and not the SEC, because that is something that John is going to be handling, the case against the SEC.
Yeah.
And in any event, what people need to realize is John's case against the SEC is not filed. He's got a lot of people that will sign up as soon as it's filed. My case was withdrawn, so it's not filed either. Whenever they do get filed, it's going to be a tough order to get past, like a motion to dismiss. Because for John's case, the government will say we've got immunity because of these various governmental immunity rules, and I'm not an expert on it. I'd have to deep dive into all the case law. There's exceptions and all this, but basically, if you're acting in your government capacity and you weren't going so far off the rails, you'll be immune from being sued. And so it's hard. There's a Second Circuit case out there when the Madoff people sued the SEC, and the judge in her order said the SEC, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but not much. The SEC was terrible. They fell asleep at the wheel. They didn't do what they were supposed to. They failed in every way, shape, or form. But they got immunity for this one, so you can't sue them. And so that's what's likely to happen again here. And, well, I shouldn't say that's what's likely.
Yeah, because what if a lot of corruption? What if there's so much corruption that's exposed? I mean, there's all types of trails going every which way on Twitter and every other platform. What if there's legitimate corruption that's exposed and they can't hide from it?
So again, I'd have to look at all the cases where the cases were allowed to go forward. That's one reason, is if they're just acting so far outside of their scope, that would be a reason where you could sue the SEC. But then that's also the reason why I framed the case against Hinman and Clayton personally. And the reason that's almost never done is because government workers usually don't have hundreds of millions of dollars, behind their names.
Yeah.
Jay Clayton and Bill Hinman do. So there's actual money to recover if you sue them personally. And it would be easier, I think, for Bill, not as easy for Jay, but still enough to have a good faith claim, which is that they basically did torturous interference. That's what the name of the claim is. And basically the elements there is that there was what's called like a business expectancy. There wasn't a contract, so it's not torturous interference with contract. There's a business expectancy between XRPL network users. Everybody was using the network for a particular reason, and Jay and Bill knew about that. They understood that that's why people use the network, and they said, we're going to go out on our own and destroy this use, for no valid reason, no appropriate reason. And so the first thing that I would do if I was their lawyers when this lawsuit got going is saying, one, I was acting for the government at all times, and I can't be sued in my personal capacity. And then two, there wasn't a business expectancy, or what we did in just filing the case wasn't unreasonable. And that's where I have to come back and say, look at all these conflicts. You never told the SEC about them. You never said all your clients at your law firms would get favored treatment. So that's the angle there. But it's not an easy, slam dunk case. Sure. Neither is suing the SEC. But also, it was not a slam dunk to file a motion to intervene on behalf of thousands of XRP holders. John Deaton went ahead and said, I'm doing it anyway. And he got in. And that's almost unprecedented, if not unprecedented. So it's just, you never give up hope. You always got to at least try and do what needs to be done for justice to be done. And, if you don't win and the system's that far gone, you don't win, but you don't give up before you even try.
Decentralized justice is what it's called. And that's what's happening right here for sure. So where can people sign up just for that process?
You can go to xrplawsuits.com. That is the lawsuit page. I finally got my new firm that I have created for cryptocurrency issues. It's called HODL Law. And so you can go to hodllaw.org, O-R-G, and sign up that way too. And
nice.
If you need any other crypto-based help, love helping people in any type of situation. We're looking for a lead plaintiff right now for the Songbird airdrop. If you want to get your Songbird back from the exchanges that didn't do it, give me a call, shoot me an email, and love to talk about it.
And then your Twitter handle is Freddie Riz, @FreddieRiz, and then they can also go over there and then click on the xrplawsuits.com from your pinned tweet, right?
It's a pinned tweet, and you can follow it that way, or you can just shoot me a direct message. And just remember on Twitter that imposters are everywhere, so just make sure my handle, it's me, before you reply. I as a lawyer, I'm not going to ask you any personal identifying information right off the bat. I wouldn't do that. Lawyers wouldn't do that until you actually have a phone call with them. So, eventually, that's the weird thing. It's because it's a little different than what you hear on by most, influencers or whatnot. Is at some point, if I'm going to represent you, I do need to get a lot of specific, personal, confidential information. I need to give you an attorney-client engagement agreement, but that's never going to be something that happens after I haven't personally spoken to you.
Yeah.
So just don't email, direct message any sensitive, confidential information. That's for later on down the road in a client engagement.
Yeah, we'll make sure to drop all the links inside the description for you as well.
Thank you so much,
Fred. What's your take on that artwork that Dale dressed up for you?
I'm glad. I was thinking, where did I need to interrupt somebody before I got off to say that you were reading my mind? I loved it. Patrick sent it to me out of the blue, and I'm like, who did this? This is great. And he's like, Dale did it. I'm like, who's Dale? And then that's how I found out about Limitless. So I thought it was awesome. And
nice.
It's going to turn into a really nice NFT for you. Thank you for that compliment. And I think you'll be saying thank you when we get this thing all done for you. I think you'll love it. Please stay tuned for part 2 of our interview with Patrick Riley and Fred Rispoli from Reaper.Financial.